What's going on, everybody? It is that time again. The Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 175 on this Monday, May 19th, 2025. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy with you on a Monday. Switching things around a little bit this week. Didn't get to have a recruiting show like usual at the end of last week, so we're doing me and Collin today. Got a lot of recruiting stuff to talk about. We'll circle back with James later in the week to kind of get into softball, super regionals coming up, that sort of thing later on in the week. But we got CK here, a lot to talk about. You know, we were talking not that long ago that it had been over 100 days, and so you got a commitment. Well, they've gotten 2 since we last spoke. We'll break it down, what to know about the new pickups in 2026. We'll also talk about what's next. Is OU starting to pick up some momentum in 2026? And yes, we will get into the latest with Bowe Bentley, 2026 quarterback. A lot of interesting developments there as Oklahoma and LSU continue to battle it out for the Texas product. We'll get into all the latest there later on in the show as well. The CK, we'll start on the good news. Like I said, just a couple of weeks ago, we were talking, it had been over 100 days. And so you had got a commitment, and we were saying, what's the deal? Are they going to get this thing going? The 2026 class was tiny. It's like, can we get some good vibes? Well, they've got it going. They got a couple commitments. We'll start with Niko Jandreau, the 3-star safety from Chandler, Arizona. Comes in at 6'1", $185 on our official database. He is our number 113 overall safety, number 17 player in the state of Arizona. This is a guy who, Collin, you're going to get into it. Feels like a cheetah type of guy. Maybe he's bigger, that sort of thing. What do you know about Niko, and what do you kind of make of the pickup, and I guess kind of where he fits in down the road here? An interesting addition, though, with Niko from Chandler, Arizona here.
Textbook Brent Venables player.
Yeah, that's how it feels.
Perfect fit for this defense. Ideal slot, specifically into the cheetah position. Now he'll be recruited and taken as a safety, and we have seen Brandon Hall, who accepted Niko's commitment in person, take guys like Michael Boganowski, who were previously perceived as closer to the box players, and he allowed a guy like Boganowski and potentially someone like Niko to explore the back end of the defense and see what you're able to accomplish at safety. And to be quite honest with you, there is some flexibility here. I think that the likes of a Reggie Powers, for example, and some of those guys that can play that cheetah position on their way up. The name of the game here is flexibility and versatility. And I wrote in the commitment analysis piece that at the end of the day, Niko Jandreau is all versatility, all flexibility, and because of that creates the ideal floor for a defense like Oklahoma's. I mean, about as physical of a defensive prospect as you will find out there in the state of Arizona, and really in general. This guy just likes to try and decapitate people on the field, but I find him interesting because I think that the question is going to be, okay, is he better suited to play safety, linebacker? Does he have what it takes to play safety or linebacker? Is he built for that? And I think that that's debatable, but I think especially in an era where you have a guy like Kendall Dolby who has the play temperament, even with the frame that fits right into that cheetah position. And when you break down the cheetah role, what's asked of it, Jandreau to me is going to seamlessly transition into the cheetah. I love what I saw from like a pure tackling standpoint, very sound in attacking the ball carrier, but he'll put his head in your chest. Like he's going to test your willpower on a consistent basis. I think at the end of the day, I described him as a seek and destroy individual who will ultimately have his ceiling at the collegiate level determined by his coverage ability. There's some of that in the tape, but not enough, maybe sample size to determine just how good he is or can be against collegiate body types and athletes. But in general, he is a sound tackler, a menace against the run. I love the fact that he attacks the clutch point and breaks up passes or forces a lot of fumbles, which is going to help, obviously, with the value of turnovers. And in general, like, this is a guy, too, with the character and the mentality that this defensive staff is going to love to coach up.
Yeah, you said it right at the top. It just feels like a really good fit. Feels like a Brent Venables guy. You talked about it. That's when I've kind of looked up some stuff on Niko, trying to just learn a little bit about him. That was what kept coming up. Thumper, hard hitter, plays really hard. It just right there. You're people probably listening and watching are nodding their head like, "Yep, that's a Brent Venables guy." And like you said, coming in as a safety. Maybe some flexibility as a linebacker or certainly a Cheetah, whatever, that'll be ironed out over time. But, Brandon Hall is, we talked about it over the years. He continues to be unbelievably underrated. Really, really good on this staff. His position has really never been an issue. He's recruited at a good level, and you kind of keeping that going here with Niko. So I'm excited. He seems like an exciting player. Hopefully, get eyes on him at some point, in the near future. But he's this is another nice pickup, and it broke the dry spell, right? It always nice. It was pleasant news, because we had talked about it. It'd been a long time. It had been multiple months since Oklahoma got someone in 26 to just kind of get the ball rolling a little bit. And they did that here on the defensive side with Jandreau. So an exciting pickup. I think one that, fans will be excited about it a little bit. I know a lot of what made, I'm sure some people will look at 3-star, the rating isn't like outrageously high or anything. Is there something to be said just to the fact that a little bit of, he's kind of a tweener as far as safety linebacker, that probably plays at least a small part in it, but he's a good, he's an interesting player. I think he's going to be a nice fit with Venables and this scheme in particular. It just feels like a good fit at Oklahoma. And obviously, that too, obviously.
Look, it's interesting because Niko Jandreau commits, and I think a lot of people looked at the star rating, and then I actually just got off of a hour-long radio hit type in the Texas market, talking some recruiting for the Longhorns, and they took an 86 grade 3-star, and the Longhorns fans are upset too. So Oklahoma fans, Texas fans, everyone in these like big markets is mad that the program's taking 3-star guys. But here's what I want to remind folks about. The star ratings and rankings process at 24/7 Sports specifically is based on the NFL draft projection. And why that's a key point to make is that the rating of a player doesn't necessarily reflect what they are going to do or are capable of at the collegiate level. It's the long-term ceiling of a player to get to the ultimate destination that is the NFL.
Yeah.
And the 24/7 Sports rankings versus these college program boards are very different because recruiting rankings have to factor in, okay, what is this player going to be capable of? What is he going to develop into? Can he grow? All that stuff. And what would that look like for him whenever he goes on into the NFL draft? Where is he going to get picked? Well, in these college staffs, like they're talking about, don't really care about the NFL draft. Does this player fit our scheme, right? Which is a very major differentiator between the way that recruiting rankings versus college program boards go. Scheme-specific stuff does not factor in for us. It definitely does for these coaches who are trying to keep their jobs, right? And so you really kind of start there with Niko Jandreau. Like, this is a player who the floor, like I mentioned, is there because he's kind of an ideal fit for this kind of defense at Oklahoma. And that's why OU is thrilled to get a Niko Jandreau. That's why a Texas will be thrilled to get someone like a Yaheem Riley. And while a lot of other SEC programs are out there taking 3-stars, their fan bases are going to get upset. But it's like these SEC coaches also have to make sure they have guys in their program who they can develop as specific fits for what they're trying to do, because that's how you win games, maintain depth in the transfer portal era, and it's how you keep your jobs. So Niko Jandreau, big deal. And then here's the other thing too. The relational value of recruiting is still very relevant. And I'll get to this more in a second. but OU was thrilled to add Niko Jandreau because everything I just talked about him, character, specific fit, he's an ideal fit for Oklahoma, defensively, program in general. He also has someone who he is tied to that OU sees as another specific fit for what they're trying to do. And there's a lot to say about that as well. But Josh, I want to transition to the other commitment because speaking of relational value, a guy on OU's roster currently kind of helped Oklahoma pull in the likes of a Jakore Smith.
Yeah, Jakore Smith, just a couple days later. So you had this long dry spell, where they didn't bring anyone in 2026. Fans getting a little antsy, kind of wondering what's the deal on the recruiting side of things. Why is it so quiet? They get Niko, and a couple days later, they get Jakore Smith, like Collin referenced. Now, Jakore is a blue chip guy, 4-star linebacker from Bryant, Arkansas. He's our number 18 overall linebacker in the class, number 4 player in the state of Arkansas. 6 foot, 190 is a guy that, look at the offer sheet. It's impressive. Collin, we talked about a couple times with linebacker recruiting has been, I don't want to say weird, but, they only took one each of the last 2 years. Marcus James last year, James Nesta the year before. And so coming into this season, you love the top end of that room, but it's a little thinnish because you haven't been signing very many. Now you go get a guy like Jakore Smith, who you feel like, is going to be a legitimate, player for you, obviously, in due time. Talk about Jakore a little bit. Just how good is this kid? And obviously, like you said, a current player playing a part in bringing him in, and to get into that a little bit too.
I do want to bring up, like you mentioned, the recruiting side for the linebacker position has been strange. They have taken one. And he is the first, that is Jakore Smith, linebacker to commit to Oklahoma since Marcus James committed, right? So
yeah, I was there. That was a long time ago. That was before. When was that? That was before, obviously, last season. I
want to say it was November of 23.
Was it during the season? I thought it was before the season. I could have been wrong.
Maybe.
Because he committed the same time as Trey Washington, right? They committed together. The surprise commitment. Way back when.
Which I will say, I was in the parking lot of Cedar Hill High School when those two commitments came through. So I want to say that was during the year. Anyway, it has been, pretty much like multiple months since Oklahoma
been a while.
Went and got a linebacker on the recruiting side. Much was made of Zach Alley and the lack of commitments there. Nate Dreiling came in, and I will say that Zach Alley specifically was someone who Jakore Smith singled out as kind of like his guy. He talked a lot about, to me, Zach Alley's days of just calling Jakore, like if Zach was in a car and just driving around, he'd call Jakore and they just talk life. And Alley leaves for West Virginia. That kind of left a vacancy there. And Nate Dreiling steps in with the task of catching up in that recruitment with the likes of a blue chipper and Jakore Smith. Well, like you mentioned, so many other big name programs were after this guy. Well, Nate Dreiling is definitely up to the test. He goes out to see Jakore Smith in person at his high school, and Jakore told me that their conversation really kind of weighed on him, had an impact on him. He likes the fact that Dreiling is kind of similar, and like Jakore said, and I believe this was a direct quote, "I'm not looking for a friend in a coach. I'm looking for a coach, but I'm looking for a coach who can loosen me up and, get me to think about more than just football." And Dreiling did exactly that, which is why ultimately Jakore Smith kind of accelerates the timeline here. He had a full official visit slate booked, the likes of Arkansas, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, so on. Really looking forward to getting him on campus. He was going to OV with OU as well, and he just said, you know what, I'm done. I'm ready to go home. And Dreiling plays a role in that. I think Jakore will tell you a lot of jokes about Brent Venables. Another direct quote of Jacore's was Brent's funny, or at least he tries to be. And I just think Jakore likes kind of the personality of this OU staff. and it is a linebacker-centric staff at that, which makes Jakore Smith another kind of perfect fit. But I would argue that it's almost the inverse. OU sees the Jandreau brothers as a perfect fit. This feels like a perfect fit for Jakore Smith, and there's a lot of value in that. You then factor in kind of what I was talking about earlier, the relational stuff. When Oklahoma went and got Amarian Robinson in the 2025 cycle, that was seen as a massive win for Oklahoma, especially because OU had Amarian Robinson valued as one of its top safeties on the board across the cycle. But Amarian Robinson, former high school teammate of Jakore Smith, and beyond that, like Amarian Robinson and Jakore Smith aren't just former teammates. They are very close friends. Amarian Robinson actually was the one who was taking Jakore Smith with him to a lot of his OU visits as a committed player to Oklahoma, and really putting in the work on the peer recruitment front. And Jakore said, look, I didn't think I was going to Oklahoma the whole time. I thought they'd be in my top 5, and I didn't think I would pick them in the end. But Amarian literally got me to Norman a lot more. And because of him driving me out there or whatever else, I was able to evaluate OU more for myself. So I give a lot of credit to Amarian Robinson here as well for not necessarily influencing it from like a, hey, come here thing. Sure. But Amarian, like, if Amarian doesn't take Jakore Smith with him to Oklahoma, there's a lot of appeal to go play for the Razorbacks or the Kansas State Wildcats, right? And so very interesting recruitment. I'm a big fan of the player. I think people know that I got to watch Jakore in person last year during the season. He was flying all over the field. This is another run and hit linebacker who is very physical. He's not the biggest player in the world, but I said that the very loose working player comparison here would be Kip Lewis coming out of high school, because Kip was a somewhat undersized, specifically very slender, underweight player who needed specifically 2 years to get to the proper weight. And then he ended up being a volume tackling, fly around weak side backer type who plays relentless. And that to me is kind of Jakore Smith's outlook. Obviously, if you want to get into the nitty gritty of specific player comparison, the Kip Lewis thing doesn't specifically fit, but I'm talking more about player comparison relative to what he is now and then the long-term outlook. I view this guy as someone who, give him 2 years to sit in the crock pot, really add the juice, and then all of a sudden he gets on the field, and I said it in the commitment analysis, whether it is weak side backer where he could slide right in and make a ton of plays. I also think he kind of has the play temperament of a Kendall Dolby, and with him being a little bit lighter, maybe he can play some cheetah for you as well. So,
yeah.
And again, you're asking for someone in the weak side, but especially that cheetah role, who can play the run and everything that entails, but also can cover. And Jakore is someone who in the short to intermediate concepts can cover relatively well. So OU fans should be thrilled about this get. Oklahoma should be thrilled that Jakore Smith decided to accelerate the timeline. And I think Jakore Smith is really excited to come to Norman.
Yeah, welcome to the party, Nate Dreiling. First real big win for him, obviously recruiting-wise, since he's been here, and I hadn't been here very long. But, I mean, Jakore obviously fully acknowledging that the class is still small, because it is. We're still early, and, we talked about that, obviously, again, that they're still kind of filling in the spots here in 2026. But Jakore comes in as the highest-rated recruit in the class as of right now, in our rankings currently, right? So, I mean, it's a notable get in a lot of ways. He's a 4-star. I mean, he has a lot of offers. It's a legitimate pickup. And, it's funny because having covered Brent Venables for several years now, and meeting and learning about all these guys that they've brought in, whether it's from the high school level through the portal, they all are kind of Brent Venables guys. Like, you can really see, it's very apparent, like the common thread through all the guys that Brent Venables and his staff and the guys that they have brought in and added to their team. And it sounds like Jakore is another one that fits right into that. And you talk about kind of that coach relationship and, wants a a coach to kind of coach him hard and all that sort of thing. It's not to like slight the Lincoln Riley era players at all, but it's just kind of you can see it. It's like just a common thing, and it sounds like Jakore fits right into that mold as well. And that linebacker room, like we talked about, they've only signed one the last couple of years, and so we'll see what else they do in this class. Obviously, still early, but this is another good one to add in there. Obviously, with Smith, a very exciting player. So we'll see what happens down the road. And like you said, going into Arkansas, getting another legitimate player is always nice. And Omari Robinson chipping in. So a lot to like here with this one. Kind of how you did it, the level of player, his kind of attitude towards it. I think there's just kind of a lot of boxes being checked with this one. So exciting to say the least for Oklahoma fans, I think, with Jakore Smith. So as far as elsewhere in 2026, some momentum, it would seem. You get 2 commits, in a week on the defensive side of the football. 2 guys that I think are going to certainly excite fans. At 2 positions of strength. Seems like you're getting some momentum. What's kind of next right now in 2026? And we'll get into Bowe Bentley here in just a little bit. Obviously, I know there's a lot of attention on that. We've talked about him a lot, and we will continue to over the next probably month or so. But what's kind of some other things in 26 you're watching for as kind of next up? Is it seems like, the ball is kind of getting rolling a little bit here. We're getting to like official visits and stuff coming up in June, and you got Champion Barbecue about a month away. You just added a couple guys. Feels like things are kind of starting to shift positively. Where are your eyes kind of go next for Oklahoma as they continue to kind of ramp up this 26 class right now?
I mean, how about let's go right to this Friday and let's see if Oklahoma can get another, because Brian Harris, the defensive lineman out of the state of Florida, is going to make his decision at 3:00, I believe, Eastern time. And he is down to a top 5 of Oklahoma, Penn State, Alabama, Michigan, and South Carolina. I think Oklahoma is very optimistic here. I think that as we head down the stretch, again, it's commitment week for Brian Harris. OU feels like if it's not in pole position in the leadership slot, then it's close. And I think this is kind of your classic Southeast defensive lineman that Oklahoma finds. And it's kind of that perfect blend of like regional Southeast powers are involved, but there's an opening there. Oklahoma's capitalizing on a window of opportunity. You have a Penn State who likes Brian Harris, but I think OU, the pitch that it's able to provide to someone like Brian Harris on defensive line development, the way that this scheme fits him, you could see him potentially competing for some reps at 3 Tech after a year or two. And in general, like Oklahoma has worked hard to recruit this player. And so the Sooners are hoping for some good news come this Friday. Now, we'll see what happens after that. This kind of feels like someone who especially because of the top 5, right? Like he had a pretty loaded official visit slate. One thing we probably aren't talking about enough is the stakes of the season ahead and what that could mean for better or worse in terms of recruiting.
Sure.
And so getting Brian Harris on Friday, if Oklahoma pulls it off, doesn't necessarily mean that a defensive lineman is just going to be shut down, right? I think that even if he is like, no, I'm not going to entertain anybody, we get into the fall, depending on how that looks, like a lot of these SEC programs aren't just going to let a player at premium position like defensive line stroll into the sunset in Norman, Oklahoma. So I'm very interested to see who wins the Brian Harris sweepstakes. Again, that coming up on Friday. That's kind of the first player that I wanted to bring up here. Yeah,
no doubt. And, we talk about all the time the continuity on the defensive line, really the whole defensive staff, but the way they built that thing up, and the way Todd Bates is, there's a lot to like right now if you're a defensive line prospect, especially an interior guy. So interesting, name to note there. We'll keep an eye on that on Friday. Obviously, we'll let you know how it goes. Collin will be all over it leading up to it, I'm sure. And we'll have coverage on Friday after, Brian, makes that official one way or another. But certainly an interesting name to know there, and continuing to kind of keep the momentum going on the defensive side in particular, if you could, make it happen.
Yeah.
What else?
So
2026.
Let's talk linebackers, because now I think a lot of people are curious who could potentially fill out the class? How many is OU taking?
Sure.
Because depending on how you view Niko Jandreau, does that mean that they've already slotted in 2 backer takes? And
yeah,
look, I think that Oklahoma went into this cycle specifically saying, we love linebackers here. We know that we haven't added very many, and we know the potential turnover at that position following 2025. Got to add a lot of bodies. My whole preparation for this cycle was based on this linebacker staff basically going, if we like 4 players at the position, we'll get them. Like, we'll figure it out later.
Right.
And I think that's where you go back to Niko Jandreau and you start talking about Bowe Jandreau. Bowe Jandreau, twin brother of Niko, a linebacker-specific player, 6'1", 215 pounds, another 3-star prospect out of the state of Arizona. So here's what's weird. Niko Jandreau commits to Oklahoma. Obviously, Oklahoma is excited. But OU is even more excited because not even 2 or 3 days before that, Bowe Jandreau gets an offer from Texas. And so I kind of told some folks like, hey, you know, obviously big get, but also you got to appreciate the fact you add Niko when Bowe just got the call from Texas. And folks are like, yes, obviously that's a thing. Then there's steam behind the scenes. Hey, does Bowe accelerate the timeline? Does he choose to make a decision a little bit earlier? And in the midst of all that, Bowe suddenly schedules an official visit with Texas for June 6th. So this is interesting because now we're talking about a Red River recruiting battle that potentially is entirely based upon twin brothers splitting up. I don't know that happens all that often. But yeah, man, it's interesting. I mean, I think that if you're Oklahoma, you're glad that you have the Niko Jandreau card to play with Bowe. You're glad to a degree that you're taking Bowe Jandreau into the Champion Barbecue official visit weekend on June 20th. And by the time that rolls around, his Texas official visit on June 6th will have been, you know, very far in the background. But this is what I said on the Texas Longhorns radio station, what I'll say here on the Oklahoma podcast. Like, it is interesting to me that the twin brother commits. There's suddenly buzz that the other brother might follow suit, and then that Texas OV gets booked in the middle of all that. Like, that it tells you at the very least Bowe wants to give Texas. And then he has a official visit with Oregon on deck as well. I mean, that's not nothing, right? So Bowe Jandreau is going to maybe create a little bit more drama for Oklahoma than originally anticipated. Do I think that Oklahoma probably still finds a way to get this figured out, or OU should be seen as the leader? Obviously. Like, it. Yeah. I think everyone would be shocked if Bowe Jandreau opted to not play with his brother Niko long term. But you can never rule out the possibility, and that's why I think, dating back to what I said earlier in the pod, you always have to factor in the relational value of these recruitments.
Yeah, I love this. This is fun. It's funny that they're obviously twins. But Bowe's got 30 pounds on him, as of right now. That could all change as things go along and, the work goes and you get older, whatever. But, it's a fun storyline. And, like you said, the vast majority of the time, the brothers will stick together, right? But, it does happen. Brothers split up, from time to time. But obviously, this is a well that Oklahoma's gone down before, bringing, two from the same family, whether it was McCulloughs at one point in time, certainly the Bowens right now, the Hawkins right now. This is something that Oklahoma has done before, certainly in the Brent Venables era. And it would feel, like you said, good that they could do it again. But Texas getting involved makes it even more interesting, So this is just kind of a fun battle here from a lot of different angles. But yeah, Bowe's a fun player. These two guys, they both we talked about it with Niko earlier, just kind of Brent Venables guys, hard hitting, hard nosed players, kind of no nonsense guys. It'd be nice. And, you're talking about the linebacker recruiting and only signing one the last couple of years. You could flip that real quick with the fact you already got Jakore. If you get Bowe, we talked about Niko could maybe be a linebacker at one point in time. Like all of a sudden you're bringing in a lot of guys that you can be pretty excited about down the road. So fun one here, and certainly one that will be fun to keep up with. If they could bring both these guys in, these two brothers, obviously you got Niko committed already. That would be quite a swing to get both these dudes, and I think would be one that would excite fans certainly, and it should.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we talked a lot about Niko's game. Bowe is another one who I wrote down. I'm coming up with a lot of fun catchphrases for these violent players that Oklahoma's recruiting. I wrote down headhunter with his hair on fire. I like linebackers who you can see on tape they got the itch. Like their anxiety, they just have that internal feeling of like, I got to do something. And watching Bowe again this morning, I was like, you can see him excited to do something. He doesn't know what it is yet, but he wants to go hit something. And so he's another one that is an ideal fit for Oklahoma. And I kind of talked about it, like he's kind of your new age linebacker, not the biggest, not the most conventional frame, but the physicality, some of the work at the next level, some of the range. There's value in what he brings to the table. It's why Oklahoma, Oregon, Texas, and many others are recruiting him. Last thing, unless you had anything else to talk about with the Jandreaus, is Ben Wenzel. So I think that if Oklahoma gets to a point where they have to start turning away linebackers, first of all, that's a doomsday scenario or just a depressing state of affairs for Brent Venables and co, right? Like linebackers trying to commit to you and you have to tell them, sorry, man, we're stocked full. But Ben Wenzel is another who Oklahoma is very involved with right now. Our own Blake Antkowiak should be having a story up on him soon. But the text that I got from Blake was, how about this for a headline? Quote directly from Ben Wenzel: Oklahoma is my leader going into official visit season.
You like that? Yeah.
Not bad. You like that. Yeah, man. I think when you talk about Wenzel, 3-star backer, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, a few others in there. I don't think that Wenzel is one who is necessarily impacted by all these commitments going on right now, but I also think that it's kind of with him and then a number of others out there that I don't have the time to talk about. Like a lot of these linebackers are going to have to realize, hey, if I want a spot at Oklahoma, I'm going to have to make that call soon. And I don't think that a lot of timelines are necessarily aligned here. And so for Wenzel, it's kind of like, okay, if you love Oklahoma and Oklahoma loves you, but you know that like Oklahoma's kind of got to figure out who loves them the most and wants to be part of the class.
Yeah.
What does that mean for Wenzel and the way that he handles the next few months? Obviously, I think he would like to take his official visits, do the due diligence, follow his own personal timeline and all that stuff. But I think that this concept kind of applies to, honestly, a lot of linebackers in 2026 because of some of the stuff that I've heard with Oklahoma, Texas A&M, a few other programs that are starting to fill up at linebacker a little bit.
Sure.
I don't know. It's interesting. But I did want to mention Wenzel because this is someone specifically who has mentioned Oklahoma as his leader. He's going to really have to figure out what that means because with Bo Jandreau, now Jakore Smith, Niko Jandreau, and so on and so forth, and then a lot of these other linebackers that are taking OVs with Oklahoma, he's got some thinking to do as we get into the summer.
So let me ask you this, with all these linebackers, is this Nate Dreiling doing it? Is it Wes Goodwin in on these? Brent Venables, obviously, certainly linebackers, his baby as well. But, where are you is it Dreiling kind of running points on these? What are you kind of, where are the kind of the recruiting, who's doing the recruiting on all these guys? Because obviously they're in on a bunch of linebackers here we just talked about.
Yeah, I think that you really do have to give a tip of the cap to Brent Venables. I thought
Sure.
that Jakore Smith said specifically, Brent Venables is not recruiting me like just a head coach. That quote to me is very significant. A lot of head coach. Look, head coaches have a recruiting style, right? It's like the head honcho, the boss, like, oh, we'd love to have you here. So, and it's usually pretty surface level stuff because of what that job entails.
Sure.
Brent, as we know, like takes the linebacker spot personally. And I think that he does a lot of personal recruiting for a lot of recruits in general, but these linebackers specifically. And I think that Brent played a primary role in Jakore Smith accelerating that timeline. And I think that applies to a lot of these other guys. Nate Dreiling has been covering a lot of ground. You've seen him out on the recruiting trail, visiting these players in person, building that relationship, that trust. Yeah. So I think that carries a lot of weight. But then it goes beyond that. I think Wes Goodwin, kind of his role as the outside linebackers coach, quasi outside linebackers coach, he is involved in these recruitments. I've had a couple of recruits bring him up. And then I'll say this for the record, like James Skalski gets brought up as well.
Yeah.
And
good call. Yeah.
Look, man, Skalski's got a bright future ahead in this industry. I remember that James Nesta, who I forgot to mention earlier, although Nesta potentially could be a cheetah guy as well, so you just don't know how he positionally fits long term. James Nesta was one that James Skalski played a role in, and Wes Goodwin wasn't around for that, obviously, but Skalski kind of did some things that I think Goodwin is contributing to as well in recruiting efforts. And so, look, man, we talk about it a lot, we joke about it a lot, but like it's not just Venables who cares about the linebacker spot. This whole OU crew almost has a hint of linebacker in them, and that shows in these recruitments. And I think that's why, honestly, like they're able to cover ground with like the Ben Wenzels so quickly. Why a guy like him is already saying Oklahoma's my leader, when I would argue even a couple of months ago, that's probably not the case. Right. So group effort for sure, and it's probably going to pay off in a big way.
No doubt, and we got more coverage to come. Like Collin said, Blake, with more on Wenzel coming up here in the near future. And it's getting to that time of year we talk about all the time. Recruiting really picking up here over the next few months. Camp season coming up, obviously, with some camps in Norman and Champion Barbecue Month away, all that good stuff. We do have one more big thing we want to hit before we get out of here, which is obviously Bowe Bentley, 2026 QB. We've talked about a lot, as you would expect. A quarterback targeted, really kind of the main focus in 26 right now. Jaden O'Neal's still committed, but obviously we're kind of seeing the way that's kind of going. It seems like as Oklahoma continues to be very aggressive for Bentley. Collin, Bowe made it official that it's Oklahoma and LSU now, which we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago, I guess it was now, where Georgia takes Jared Curtis. That obviously was going to take them out of the Bowe Bentley sweepstakes. It's Oklahoma and LSU. It's a 2-horse race. Just today, he kind of shifted his visit schedule around a little bit. He's still coming to Oklahoma. Don't worry, everyone. He's coming to Norman here coming up at the early part of June. I guess for you, just a little bit of a temperature check here. What do you make of kind of the schedule changes? I know that there's been a lot of kind of thought that LSU is really, making a push right now. Obviously, he's going to be visiting Baton Rouge here in the near future also. Just kind of size it up for me right here with Oklahoma and LSU both chasing, obviously, Bowe Bentley, who it seems like as time has gone on has become almost more and more coveted. Like he's ramping up more and more, and people are really starting to kind of get a sense of this guy is going to end up being, and we already kind of always knew this, but a legitimate high-level quarterback prospect. And obviously the Sooners and Tigers are both doing everything they can to bring him in.
Yes. So, man, there's going to be a lot to talk about. It's crazy that every single time we have to talk about this topic, it feels like it's redundant, yet there are wild developments.
It's worthy. Like it keeps being reasons to bring it up. It's crazy.
Right. So even as of this morning, wake up to a text, hey, it's not out yet, but OV dates are changing. And I texted you like, hey, show's going to be loaded today. Okay, let's start with the LSU crystal ball because I have to do some kind of morning announcement style stuff here. So this will be interesting for the fans out there listening and watching. At 24/7 Sports, we're always trying to be better. We're always trying to give fans and consumers more incentive or reason to be interested and involved in the recruiting process. Obviously, one of the chief frustrations of college football's entire landscape is the transactional nature of recruiting these days, and overwhelmingly how much that has kind of impacted the way that people view these recruits and things like that. So one thing you're going to see out there that's different, but is important to know is our team at 24/7 Sports is going to start doing the 24/7 Sports staff projection. That's the key word here, staff projection. Crystal balls started as like a, hey, here's what we're hearing, here's what we think could happen. They were essentially seen as something that could potentially let fans know what's going on or kind of what we're hearing. And now it's kind of devolved into fans thinking, oh, crystal ball just went in. He's committing there. That's happening.
Yeah, gospel. Yeah.
Right. That's not the case. We're going to try and make it clearer that when you pull up a kid's profile, the logo you see next to it is like more so who currently leads for the recruitment, who has the momentum as you're looking at the player today. And that's what now the 24/7 Sports staff projection is. It's who our specifically national team at 24/7 Sports is hearing has the lead or is garnering the most buzz as things stand today, so that at the end of the day, fans can get bought back into the ebbs and flows of a recruitment. They can have fun again following the changes that these players face. And they can
and it's not correct me if I'm wrong, it's not attached to any one insider as well. So it kind of takes a little bit of the pressure off some of the insiders to kind of be a little more open of like, this is how it's going without it being you picked, X and, you're wrong. You know what I mean? It's a little more of a, I think most people would understand that. A little more of kind of the way that the things are shifting at that given time rather than just a straight up, this guy picked this. You know what I mean?
It is a anonymous pick, number one, or projection.
Right.
So you don't know like exactly who or what was the driving force behind it. But then also, because it's not attached to anyone specifically, it doesn't sacrifice intel, and it doesn't prevent our team at 24/7 Sports from trying to give you the latest and let you know, again, the storyline style nature of a recruitment. So again, that you can pull up a profile and you now have reason to be interested in what the logo is, because now a month or two ago, this logo was on his profile. I'm pulling it up today, and suddenly the current intel indicates a shift towards school X as we get into whatever. So, that was a lot, but I needed to
and there will
explain
still
to the
be
folks
crystal
out there.
balls too. It's not like those are going away. Yeah.
And for the record, so a prime example of this would be, and I'm not saying I'm doing this for the record, but like our 24/7 Sports staff projection, our national team said behind the scenes, hey, we're hearing a lot of LSU buzz. We're putting puzzle pieces together. Kind of feels like LSU's got the most steam behind it. Let's put the staff projection and let fans know LSU's got the chatter. Well, then all of a sudden, if they put it in and Collin Kennedy of Sooners Illustrated, Oklahoma's 24/7 site goes, no, I think it's Oklahoma. Well, now you're going to see the staff projection and my name right underneath it being like, I disagree. I think it's Oklahoma. And now, do I think I'm going to do that a lot? No, because number one, that would be pretty ridiculous unless I have a lot to go against it. Number two, it'd be pretty dumb of me to go against kind of the staff consensus unless I really got some scoop. Which, look, in this world, you can never rule that out. But it is going to create more stuff at the end of the day for fans to buy back into and have fun following. And I think that there's a lot of value in that. But I also think there's a lot of value in trying to tell people what we're hearing. And that gets me into the Bowe Bentley LSU staff projection.
Sure.
So at the time that this went in, there was a lot of the stuff that we just talked about. Like Joe Sloan, LSU's quarterback coach, arguably has the strongest relationship with Bowe Bentley in this recruitment. It's debatable, but it's present. LSU at that time that the projection went in had that final official visit booked. So the Tigers were going to get the long-term benefit of having the final say. And then obviously, like I was talking about last time we discussed this, it's not helping Oklahoma necessarily that Jaden O'Neal is still committed in the class. That creates a weird dynamic for everybody. And then Bowe Bentley still remembers the duration of time that it took for OU to actually offer him as someone who dreamed of playing at Oklahoma.
Sure.
So that's why, and beyond that, a lot of other intel that our team at 24/7 Sports has gathered, the projection went in. Here's a combination of everything we're hearing that indicates LSU's got the momentum. And I do think that LSU had the momentum at the time that the pick went in. Then this morning, Bo's like, you know what? I'm getting real tired of this recruiting stuff. Let me go ahead and accelerate the timeline and move my official visits.
Mm-hmm.
He was originally planning to go to Oklahoma on June 13th and LSU on June 20th, and then make a commitment arguably before the end of June. Now he will visit LSU to begin the month of June and back end of May, and then he will visit Oklahoma the weekend of June 6th.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to take away from that, right? If you're OU, you're going, okay, don't love the fact that we dedicated an entire official visit weekend for this guy, and now he's going to join in with a bunch of other recruits on June 6th. We got to retrace our steps here and restructure that OV weekend. But you're also, if you're Oklahoma, going, silver lining, we now get the last official visit. This would almost certainly indicate that Bowe is ready to make a final call ASAP, which if you're Oklahoma, man, that not only helps the fact you get the last visit, but knowing that a decision could literally come within a few days of that trip, it's huge. And LSU, that timeline getting moved up as well. LSU making their pitch, whatever that looks like, Oklahoma now gets the chance to counter, because I think we've talked about it here on the show a little bit. Let's not be naive, folks. Everywhere across the country, there's a lot of negative recruiting going on against Oklahoma, especially in the SEC. So OU, the best way to phrase it, while once not necessarily having all the momentum in the world, almost controls its own destiny with Bowe Bentley. And I also think it helps, Josh, that if you subscribe to the theory that Bowe Bentley's going to get all this done fast, I think it helps that he takes the OV of June 6th weekend, maybe simmers on it for a few days, makes the final call, and then Jaden O'Neal is planning to go take his official visit to Florida State June 13th.
Mm-hmm.
So now, where the doomsday scenario was more at play, either direction, if Bowe Bentley goes to LSU or he says, I'm going to go to Oklahoma, you now at least know which direction you need to take, right? Like, hey, I think we're going to get Bowe Bentley. We can let Jaden O'Neal know we need to go ahead and split officially in different directions. Or if Bowe tells you, hey, man, like, I think I'm going to go with LSU, you have time to buckle things down with Jaden.
Sure.
We're like a couple months away from this basically all taking place, maybe a little bit less, but it feels like a long ways away. That's just everything that goes into what literally took place this morning. And all this combines to continue to build a lot of intrigue with Bowe Bentley's recruitment.
No, it's super interesting. Like you said, Oklahoma we talked about it jokingly, but it's true, Bowe Bentley weekend. And that's now just open, in the middle of June.
Yeah.
But, he's still coming in, and you get to have him after he goes to LSU, which is generally a nice thing. You get the last laugh, you get last word, before he makes a call, seemingly, shortly thereafter. The nightmare, devil's advocate, is obviously he goes to Baton Rouge, they blow him away, and he never makes it to Norman, right? That could happen, right? That happens with guys. Now, it sounds like he probably will make both trips. I mean, you would know better than me. It seems like he's a guy pretty dead set on giving both their look, but you always have to be worried about that, right? If you're Oklahoma, is he goes to Baton Rouge, that last weekend of May, early part of June, and he just loves it, and basically like he makes his call right there. Maybe even still takes the visit to Norman, but he's already made up his mind in his head, right? That's what you'd have to worry about if you're Oklahoma. But getting him second is not necessarily a bad thing. It probably can be a good thing, get to have the second word. And we'll see. And like you said, the intriguing aspect is that this all takes place before O'Neal goes to Florida State, which is, kind of the way we felt like that was kind of going. It's still crazy that through all this, O'Neal is still committed to Oklahoma. It doesn't feel like that's going to last much longer, but you never know, right? And if Bowe does go to LSU, could Oklahoma pivot and manage to keep Jaden? I mean, who knows, right? I mean, we'll see. It's kind of a very intricate situation for Ben Arbuckle and Oklahoma to kind of dance through. So it's fascinating stuff. It's been funny, talking to you, off air, just kind of talking about how things are going. It doesn't seem like Bowe is a guy who really is like relishing this. He wants to find his best spot, right? He's not like that quintessential diva quarterback who's likes being courted. It doesn't seem like. And so he's trying to wrap this thing up and find his best spot and get it done, sort of a thing. So we'll see how it shakes out. Oklahoma and LSU battling for him. Collin's been absolutely all over this the whole way, and we're kind of getting into the meat and potatoes of it here over the next few weeks. It's going to be really interesting to keep an eye on. But yeah, the developments with the visits getting moved around just threw a whole new wrinkle into it today. So
yeah,
we'll see. It's been a wild thing considering how pretty kind of no nonsense he is. It's kind of been a crazy recruitment. It really has to kind of follow.
I mean, I was sitting there laughing when the final 2 graphic dropped, and I was like, did we need that? Like,
yeah,
I think we all kind of,
yeah.
yeah. I was like, all right. I mean, you only get recruited once, so why not get a graphic together? But it's, I don't know, even dating back to when this wasn't even really a thing, and I was writing stories about Bowe Bentley being an Oklahoma fan. I was sitting down with him, and I told him face to face, like, brother, I promise you, you will not be getting bothered by me, because you're going to be hearing from everyone else and their mother here in a few months, whether you like it or not. And it has literally become a nationwide household recruitment, even down to being a top 2. I find it very fascinating, like you mentioned, that this is someone who, if you talk to him face to face, like, I was shocked first meeting Bowe how very not quiet in terms of shy, but he is a very low toned, monotoned, slow talking, paced out player who, like you mentioned, goes against the grain of everything we know quarterbacks to be in this modern era of recruiting. And yet we are still in the midst of a heated, very public process. And I think that is layered into everything that we keep talking about. All this stuff that we, keep bringing up, it plays into how much you've seen this recruitment play out the way it has. And it's going to be fun to follow, especially for someone like me who is letting guys like Tom Loy and Mike Roach really run with this thing.
Yeah.
I'm having a blast following it and kind of at least telling this story from Oklahoma's perspective as we get into literally one of the most pivotal recruitments of the 2026 cycle.
You gotta. It feels like a must. We talked about the doomsday scenario of they end up not getting Bowe, and then can you still reel Jaden back in? Because if you lose them both, then it's kind of like, okay, now what? Where do you pivot to in the middle of summer? Quarterback is kind of where it all starts in a recruiting class, and that's been probably part of the slowness has been the kind of lack of clarity at who's the quarterback. Because we've seen every year these cycles, you get that quarterback in real early. And you kind of build from there. They don't really. I mean, again, Jaden's been committed for a long time, almost a year now. But obviously recruits know. I mean, these kids know that it's wobbly. So you want to know who the quarterback is, who's the kind of the face of your class. I'm sure that's not helping things on the offensive side. So we'll see. It's gonna be interesting next few weeks. Obviously, it's been kind of a wild thing to keep up with, and we'll see if Oklahoma can play their cards right here and get Bentley in. Or if not, manage to kind of swing back with O'Neal. We'll see how it all shakes out. But Collin's been all over it and will continue to be. We'll talk about it more, I'm sure, obviously leading up to whenever that decision gets made, which, again, it sounds like probably be sometime in June. So
yeah, and I not to beat a dead horse, but I really do believe that what will ultimately go wildly under discussed here with this move is the fact that Oklahoma sets the table to potentially pivot back to Jaden O'Neal. Probably didn't have that luxury before this development this morning.
No, it's good.
But, man, I really want to hammer home the value of Bowe doing this for Oklahoma, because now I'm not going to say you get a week, but you at least have a few days to try to save face. Yeah. Yes, which you didn't necessarily have originally. And that, if you're an Oklahoma fan, has to be something you consider with this storyline emerging.
No doubt about it. We'll be covering it and talking about it more over the next few weeks, of course. We'll probably circle back with Collin, probably talk about it more next week, I'd imagine, potentially. Obviously, we'll get back on the normal schedule, I imagine, next week. I do plan to have a show with James later this week to talk about softball, super regional, stuff like that. Maybe Wednesday, maybe Thursday. Keep an eye out for that sometime later this week. And then we'll circle back with CK, of course, on the recruiting side. As it's starting to ramp up that time of year, May, June, July, August, that's when it starts to really pick up. And as you already can tell with the two commits talked about on the show today, and I'm sure we'll have more to talk about next week, of course. CK, appreciate you as always. We'll catch up next week, my man. And good stuff as always.
Subscribe to Sooners Illustrated. You can join us for $1 if that is interesting to you. I mean, it's incredible value for the summer months of recruiting and all that. And I hope that the fans enjoy what is ahead, because, like I mentioned earlier, we are trying to get everyone really bought back into the ebbs and flows of recruiting. And it feels like with everything we just talked about, that kind of stuff is back. I'm looking forward to covering it.
Yeah, the one nice thing for, it's been, we haven't had a lot of stuff to talk about, the lack of commits and stuff like that, is that we're set up for a busy summer on that regard. As Oklahoma's
awesome.
Yeah, Oklahoma's going to be making moves. We're going to have plenty to talk about, I think, on these recruiting shows over the next few months. No doubt about it. So, again, like Collin said, subscribe, Oklahoma.247sports.com. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel and the podcast feed, wherever you watch or listen to the show. Leave a comment, leave a review, whatever. All that stuff is very helpful. So I appreciate it.
Like the video.
Yeah, 100%. And we'll be back with you later this week and, of course, next week and all throughout the summer, into the fall, all that good stuff. So for Collin Kennedy, I'm Josh Callaway. Signing off for now. We'll see you next time again, right back here later this week on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.